Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host.
Quiet on the set.
Today, we're talking about Bosch Legacy, the Prime series that wrapped its third and final season a few months ago. And I'm excited to welcome a panel of guests. First, Patrick Cady, you were the director for episode 8 of season 3, one of the 5 episodes you directed over the course of the series. Welcome back, Patrick.
Very good to be here and see all my friends.
Well, let me introduce some of those friends. Also returning to the podcast is first assistant director, Trey Batchelor, who was with Bosch Legacy for all 3 seasons. Nice to see you again, Trey.
Thanks for having me back, Skid. I thought after the last one, you might not ask me back.
Well, we will see where it goes. We're very happy to have you back. Next, making his Below the Line debut is cinematographer Jason Andrew. Jason, you started season 1 of Bosch Legacy as the key grip. You lensed episode 9 as a cinematographer, and you continued as cinematographer through seasons 2 and 3. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Skid.
Finally, Derrick, you were the gaffer for season 3. Glad you could join us today.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have all of you here. A warning for listeners, today's conversation will contain spoilers. But to start us off, I want to recap a little podcast history. Back in June of 2021, I hosted an episode about Bosch, the predecessor to Bosch Legacy that ran for 7 seasons, also on Prime. For listeners who either missed or might want to revisit that conversation, it was season 8, episode 4 of the podcast. And Patrick and Trey, you were both on that panel.
Yeah, that was a really fun time.
Yeah, it was good.
And Trey, the joking about you coming back aside, that was the inspiration for gathering folks back together. At the time, Bosch Legacy was just getting underway. I think you were just in post-production. And you guys made clear that the new show was a reset, not simply a retitled Bosch Season 8. I'm curious how that played out in practice.
Well, we brought in a pilot director, so ultimately it was kind of left up to Zetna Fuentes and her DP to how are we going to do this new show? It's more female oriented. Bosch is no longer a cop, and now the other 2 leads are female. So I think, at the time we went from Prime to Freevee, and Freevee was the production company under Prime. And so they were a different group of people than we had started off with Bosch, much more female executives. And also they wanted it more for advertising. So we had a little bit more poppy music, a little bit more color, not as dark, I would say, as Bosch. But it's interesting, as we went through Legacy from season 1, 2, 3, it kind of started going back to how Bosch originally was. People wanted to feel like it was new, but it wasn't just the same old Bosch, like you were bringing a female perspective to it.
And the other thing was then we were in a 5-act structure. This is Patrick. And it's interesting reading a script in a 5-act structure because the way they're put together is different than the way we were approaching story in the original show where there were no commercials. So you'd want those act out moments that you wouldn't worry about too much in the show. You would just, if the scene dictated something like that, you'd do it. But otherwise, you'd mostly try to transition right into the next scene.
And so you alluded to the Amazon Freevee, and while I'm not following all the sort of behind the scenes production machinations going on, how did it shift as far as the production goes when, I don't know, some of those things change? That's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that can affect what ends up on the screen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it was, as Patrick alluded to just now, before we were left to our own devices, we didn't have as much input from the studio. Now, when we shot the pilot, they were looking at it. They were involved in the wardrobe. They were much more involved in also making sure that we were creating a product that would not only bring in the Bosch fans, but bring in new fans, because it's all about ad dollars and being much more female centric. So I think it was, even though we had a lot of the crew some of the crew returning, there was still a new camera department and other departments. It was Bosch world, but Bosch was no longer a cop. So that right there presented a completely whole different problem, because we always had the police station to go back to, and we always had our cast of characters in the police station. So what we soon found out was that, we were much more on the road, much more out doing locations, and also following a lot more storylines than we had done in Bosch, the original Bosch. I don't know if Patrick has anything.
The funny thing is to say that you're going out more is a little bonkers because Bosch, the original show, was on location so much. Our location managers were telling us every year that they pulled more permits than any other TV show in town. That's including the shows that had, 20 episodes a season, the regular TV shows. We had 8 or 10, and they were still pulling more permits. So then your crew has to be so light on their feet. And I feel like Jason and Derrick were part of the DNA of how we figured out how, I can't even say we because I wasn't involved as much as they were in the, how do you pre-rig? How do you, even the production side with Trey as a producer, like how do you pick locations and tell the director you're going here? Because in the 7 days of prep, there is no time to sort out the permits and which days they're going to be on. That all has to be, especially in Los Angeles, that has to be laid out ahead of time. So there's a lot of, I don't think if Bosch Legacy had started from scratch, it would have been such a tall order. And having it come out of 7 years at Bosch with Peter Youngbrugge still involved, with Trey still involved, with the gang still a bunch of these key players involved who are making those early decisions, then you have a fighting chance of it working to the level that Freevee/Amazon wanted it to be a different show, but still present all these different things. And yeah, not having a massive standing set with a bunch of characters in it to go to is really tricky.
I wanted to comment on that too. It's Derrick lighting. Early on in the show, I was sort of it was been a long night and I was slumped against a wall somewhere. And Peter Yan, our executive producer, came over and said, how are you doing? And I said, boy, this is really brutal. I don't remember the original Bosch being this bad in terms of like the amount of moving and the company move in the middle of the night to another, one night exterior to another night exterior. And I said, maybe I'm just getting old. Like, the old body isn't putting up with this kind of schedule as well as it used to. And he said, no, it is actually more brutal than the original Bosch because of that very reason. We didn't have the big stage set to go crank out 10 pages a day, which is very easy for us to do logistically. The set lent itself to high page counts because of the nature of the kind of shooting we were doing there. So we kind of took the brunt of it. We had to make up all that time we would have done on stage by going to real places. And it felt like we were going to even more places in a day than the original show used to go. Yeah, it was. I listened to your original podcast to get ready for sitting in on this one, and you guys were talking about how smooth everything went on the original Bosch, and it did. It was a very smooth working crew, and it was very smooth on this one too. But you can only travel so many miles in a day before you really start to feel it. And I was really feeling it on this one for sure.
Yeah, Derrick, to your point on the continuity, as I mentioned before, you joined Bosch Legacy in season 3, but you had done 5 seasons of Bosch. And so you were aware of the history of the show.
Yeah, I'm sort of like the inside outsider on this one because I started the show, did the first 5 seasons, and I left for 4 years to go do other things and then was invited to come back. So I got to see, like, shockingly how things had changed, but they weren't that different. The original show, like Patrick said, we were trying to figure out how to do a show like this, and the small trucks and the lightweight footprint and all the moving around, and from a lighting perspective, we have more infrastructure than other departments have. So how do you work the rigging crews, and what kind of cable runs do we do so that we can do 2 more locations after this location in a day? And all that stuff was still there when I came back. And in fact, it was the same rigging crew, the Tucker brothers, and all that was, in fact, so many faces were the same when I came back. It was like coming home to a family, just fit right in. But there were differences too. When we first started, we were very low budget, and not that it isn't low budget now, but there was never enough money to rent the stuff that you wanted to rent. So we would light sets with kind of antiquated equipment. Like we would use KinoFlows to light backdrops instead of LEDs because KinoFlows were the cheapest thing we could find, Image 80s. And I'm not going to get too technical with it, but we made a lot of choices that way just to save money, and they still do the job. And it was kind of interesting to see now when we came back, like the LEDs were more prevalent throughout the sets, and like they had made the choices to kind of upgrade the whole show into what contemporary lighting looked like. And we had more stuff. But beyond that, I think the show was quite similar.
So talk to me a little about how these changes did play out with the pilot for Bosch Legacy.
It would be interesting because from Jason's point of view, as far as like what changed for the pilot, the DP Todd picked some lenses that were like a little more cinematic and stuff and the focal length, but it's also is a bit of a challenge. And I know, it was kind of a standard we had set, but also they were trying to put a new look on it and working with the DP, Jason.
Yes.
What do you think that, especially for the pilot episode?
Well, let me just clarify really quick. I originally was not on Bosch Legacy. I came up as the key grip on the original Bosch, and then they said we're going to go for a new look on Bosch Legacy. I was moving on, and about 1 month before shooting, they called me and said, "Hey, there's a conflict with the key grip. Would you like to come aboard as key grip?" And I said, I was shooting stuff on the weekends. I was trying to move up to being, starting to DP a little bit features, but knew that I still needed a grip. So then I came in on the first season of Bosch as the key grip, and I was at the camera test, and we're trying to use some lenses that are, smaller, older lenses, and then you realize that you don't have time. You need a fast lens change. We can't be using, some of these old Zeiss standard speeds. We had to find ways to make it quicker because it was just taking too long for simple stuff like that. So early on, we abandoned that and went to, because I wasn't on the DP on those first episodes. I think we switched to some Panavision primes instead, which made it a little quicker. But
And we brought back the zoom.
I didn't start shooting on Bosch Legacy season 1 until the 9th episode.
The point being is that, it was a pilot, it was a little bumpy, but yet inside the Michael Connelly world, we needed to follow the rules. It's still, you couldn't get outside the Michael Connelly world. And, as we went along the season, it got a lot smoother and people started to get their groove. Patrick, what did you direct season 1?
I think I came in on 2. I think I came right after. I think I did I do 2 and then
You did 2 and 4. It says season 1.
yeah, there you go. So yeah, I continued prepping.
And I felt like, who was your DP?
It was
Rodney.
Rodney, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That was a blast. That was so fun first season.
Yeah.
Rodney and me. And it's a spot I've found myself in more than once where it's you come in after the pilot and I think the first time I met Jason I was the DP coming after a pilot and second episode, and the director I had on that was this short-lived show called Valentine, and he came up to me, he's like, look, like he's seeing the first shot, at the whiteboard in the production office, and the first shots were getting off a little late because it's a pilot episode. So there's a lot of conversation about things before you roll on them, right? It just can't be helped. And this was a 7-day per episode show. He was like, we have got to change the pace. So I want to be rolling on the first shot on the first day in 30 minutes or less. And I was like, okay, we can do that. Let's make it a shot that I can, I can pull that off on. And I feel like I've had to do that a couple other times where you come into an episode and you're like, okay, the pace that the crew's been working at might seem like it's been fast, but now because we have all these budgets to take care of, we have to achieve a new pace. And let's get ready. And so I would often go to set in my prep and like start warning the keys,
By season 3 of Bosch Legacy, you guys are well-oiled machine, or you're still tweaking things?
No. I'd even say by halfway season 1, it started to become well-oiled. Season 3, I would just love to just tell you Patrick's episode that we did. I just wrote down a little note. And some of the things we didn't mention on the last podcast is that when you're doing these episodes, you have you're shooting a scene from episode 7, episode 9, you bring in directors, 3 directors during the day, and I'll speak that in a moment. But also just the time, Patrick, he started on April 1st, and we immediately went out director scouting for the next 2 days, spending like 12 hours in the van. And then like we had hair and makeup meetings. So people don't really understand is like the show's so fast, you get straight into the prep. And a lot of times you might have a draft of the script, you might have an outline of the script. I'm not going to say when Patrick got the script, but let's just say that everything is truncated. And so we do a lot of prep. In Patrick's episode, we had stunts, we had multiple locations. So basically, I wrote this down. So like day 1 for Patrick was stage, and then moved to assisted living, and that day we had two other directors he had to share the day with. Day two, we had to start off at Cal State and then move downtown to Arizona, where they do the takedown. Day three, we're at Lizona and we finished up all that work there. Day four, stage. Day five, we were at the Real Hollywood Station and then went to a house and then stage. Day six, stage, and then moved to the Bosch house where we had a couple directors working. Day seven, we went up to Castaic Lake and shot at the motel. And then we did day and night work there, also day for night. Day eight, we went to Fillmore and shot at United Chemicals. Day nine, we went back to Castaic and did some more reshooting in the sheriff's station there. And on top of this, we had to have a bee in it just to finish Patrick's stuff. I mean, Patrick's episode 8 is very, I think it's one of our meatier episodes. It's very complicated. You know, we have the, help me out with the Mexican mafia. I can't think of
But yeah, the episode starts with introducing this character that is responsible for the death of someone very important to the story. It's the best way I can say it if you haven't watched the show. And very quickly trying to establish the cruelty of this world that they're working in. And then
I think it's the cartel.
yeah, the cartel and Zorrillo, right? Was that the character? And then I love that Trey, if you know the show, you know what he's saying when he says that we started stage or wherever we started and then went and started to do the takedown. But the takedown involves essentially 3 locations, one of them across from the other, separated by a really busy street that we're also going to be shooting cop cars coming in, pulling up, shooting people escaping, them getting chased down, one of them chasing down someone that's very important to them and is going to have a huge emotional moment with, and all of our leads somehow involved. It's nothing. Oh, and a scene inside where it all falls apart. So it's not just like a one-page action sequence. There's dialogue and you know, it's awesome. It's what's I say it's awesome now because we pulled it off. Thank God for Trey and like and the team. Like there's no, I mean, I don't think.
And one of the ways we were able to do that, I was looking at my notes the day before we went down there, stunts and the second AD, Alex Daniels, our stunt coordinator, they were down there rehearsing it, and we had to fit this. I mean, I could show you like an hour and a half here. We were up on a third floor looking down, and then we street level. Then we only could do the takedown not during rush hour, so you had a small window. Plus, we had pod cars working. We had a drone. I was like looking at the drone permit they had pulled for this because they have to call LAX and go through all that stuff.
Then they bumped into a zone because of the choppers for the police department or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had like restrictions there. So it's like, yeah, if they see the episode, it's like we're on the third story of a building doing surveillance and watching this whole takedown. And then we do the takedown and then they escape out to the back, and it's very visceral. It feels very real. I was watching it today. You watch it, it goes by pretty fast and quick.
Yeah.
Literally, like that's how you make a movie. You know, that's the planning that went into that and the director's homework, and you know, it's such a team effort. I don't know, Jason, you or were you there for that, Derrick?
Yeah, I was there for it.
Yeah. So it's like you can speak to how crazy that day was.
Yeah, and the logistics, we weren't just across the street with a camera. There was actors in that building that we were shooting, you know, dialogue with, and yeah, we were all over the place.
And it's not just that we're in the building, we're on the top floor, and it's not just a regular building. It does glass replacement, and the top floors are full of all these replacement windshields that you can't, you know, you don't want to break them, and tiny hallways in between them. It was very Bosch. It was very, very Bosch. Let's find a really ridiculous location that looks cool, and then let's go in and shoot it.
Yeah. I watched that again this morning too, and that I have to say that all the interplay between Denise, the actress who plays the cop, and her cousin, it was heart-wrenching to watch. You know, at one level, it's the shoot 'em up, catch the bad guy kind of thing, but at the other, it's a very emotional. There's a very emotional piece of content that overlays the whole thing, and it ends with that, and it really leaves you that last shot with them up against the chain link fence in silhouette. It was
both so good.
Yeah, it was.
Denise just sent it.
And to Derrick's point, basically, she plays a cop, and she's the aunt of criminal suspect. And so she knows he's involved, and then she has to make the call to arrest him and turn him in. And she knows her sister, this will cause family strife.
And we talk about pulling off an episode like this, but it sounds like you guys had a lot of these kind of challenges over the course of every episode. Now, Jason, you were quiet on that part because you were doing prep, I presume, for other episodes when they were shooting this. You weren't actually the DP on episode 8.
Right.
Talk to me, all of you guys, about the teamwork that it takes to pull this off. These story arcs are going from episode to episode, right? Like the whole season is a couple of stories progressing. And I'm curious how, as a team, you guys are structured to even make this kind of filming possible.
Well, I could say it all starts for the below the line crew. It starts with the location scouts. And on Bosch, all the years I was there, the department heads didn't usually go on the location scouts because we had our hands full trying to keep the company moving and on the schedule. So we would stay on set and send our seconds, our riggers, to go on the scouts with the incoming DP and the incoming director. And then they would come back with notes for us, and we'd put our heads together and try to figure out what to do. So there's always been sort of a unique, this particular show, in that we show up on the set and a lot of stuff, a lot of decisions have been made for us. You know, we've been a party to them as much as we can without having seen it. But oftentimes we're seeing it for the first time when we get there, and decisions have been made. We may or may not agree with them once we've seen the location, but you know, you go forward and you do the thing you have to do to make it work. So I think it all starts with that.
Derrick, what was interesting to me there is that as the head of department, you might be on set with the filming where the director and the director of photography, the cinematographer, are going episode to episode. Jason, I want to ask you about your transition from key grip to cinematographer and kind of going from one role, again, every day with filming with the company, to prep and working with a specific director, and what that was like for you and in this Bosch environment.
Thank God Patrick was my first director as a full-time cinematographer on Bosch Legacy, which did make things easy.
Yeah, that really helps a lot.
Key grip for 10 seasons, or 7 years of Bosch, and then another 5 or 6 seasons before that on different shows.
Yeah, and maybe worth identifying, Patrick, that you also made the transition to director from cinematographer, so you guys have been working really close together.
Yeah, I was really lucky to make that transition, and in stages. So there were seasons where I'd get to direct an episode and then go back to shooting. And I have to say, like, all of us, Trey, Jason, Derrick, and myself, have all been working so long together. I think even making the transition to directing, they can still predict. They'll know the thing I'm going to get probably stupidly hung up on and the thing I'll be good at. And, they know where I'm going.
100%. Patrick really gets caught up on time. He's like, "We gotta go." I'm like, "Patrick, we got this. I know, this is where I got to really say, I know this is how we're going to do this scene. We can do it." And coming from a DP who's always been told, "You got to be out of the scene in 4 hours." I don't want to tell that to him, but I was like, "We got this. We'll take care of you, and we'll make our day."
Please shut up and leave me alone.
So it's nice that I can talk to him like that and say, "Well, we got this. I have your back, and I know we'll make our day." And unfortunately, a lot of times you're just like, we have 12 hours to shoot, so much work, and you don't want to skimp on anything because you want to make everything as good as you can. So it's challenging, but you make up time on you'll blow through one scene knowing that you really want to take some more time on another scene. It's an emotional scene, and so we make it work. So we know where we're going next, and we pre-light as much as we can. Derrick can go ahead and start pre-lighting the scene that's following. So we're always moving ahead, which I'm always like 3 to 4 shots in my brain ahead, going, "This is what we got to do next," which is makes everyone crazy sometimes because I'm already thinking 4 shots ahead. But for me, that's how I process things. On the show like this, you're always have to think 4 shots ahead. It's like a chess game, I feel like.
Yeah, Jason's really good at that too. And because he comes from the key grip background, he has a really good understanding of what it will take physically to do the things he's asking for. And he's able to adjust. I don't have to tell him, that's going to be an hour for us to do that thing. He's already thought about it. He knows exactly the implications of the thing he's asking for. And he's always has, like, whenever I say, "Hey, what's up next?" he always has an answer. And sometimes you don't get those answers, but he was very well prepared on this show for the season that I worked with him on. And this is the first time I've really worked with Jason as a director of photography. But yeah, he clearly, he did a lot of homework to keep things moving. Like he always knew what he wanted. He always knew what was next. We asked some pretty specific questions sometimes in order for us to move ahead, and he always had pretty specific answers. So I thought he did a great job.
Thanks.
To your point, Skid, about asking like how did he get through the process? I'm looking at Patrick's schedule in episode 8, and literally Jason came in and had to shoot a scene with a different director. And on my schedule it says Jason wrapped by 9:30 because he had to do something the next morning. I have no idea what that was, but
Be in the scout
there was
van
a
for the
lot of
next episode.
Exactly.
yeah, there was a lot of communication between the DPs and between the ADs and the producers, because a lot of times we were sharing sets and stuff like that. And so it's constant, and then he would come in there and go, dude, we got to get this in 2 hours. He goes, okay, we'll make it. So it was constant communication and constant meetings and prep. It's just, you
But
can't make
I do have one, I worked in episode 5 with Ernest Dickerson, who's the most prepared director. He's mostly storyboards, a lot of the scenes, big action scenes. So we're all prepped for 5, and we're told our lead actor Paul Calderon can't walk for this episode, and we have to shoot around it. And Skid, you've seen episode 5 is a bit pivotal scene at the end where he walks to the taco truck, and he gets shot. So how do we shoot around this? How do we we had meetings. Do we shoot this later in the season? Do we come back? And it was, they came out, he won't be walking by the end of the season. We have to shoot him out, unfortunately. So we came up with a rig. We came up with the doorway dolly where we sat him on a chair. We went handheld. He kind of swaggered a little bit, and we got him walking to the taco truck. He turned around, and unfortunately, to his demise, he gets shot. But we did that all of episode 5. Paul was pretty much could not walk.
He had hurt his Achilles tendon in the previous episode, and then it got worse over the weekend.
We have a history of Achilles injuries, Michael McDonough. Of course, Ernest figures out to put him on the dolly because he shot Spike's early movies where they did that multiple times. So of course, Ernest has that in his pocket. That's so cool.
Yeah, and then he was in a lot of scenes that episode. We found creative ways to just have him sit in the shots. We just cut out a lot of the shoe leather, which maybe sped things up because we just have it start the scene, which but that's what I'm saying. Sometimes you get a little hiccup and you get through it.
Trey, earlier you suggested that sometimes there were changes to the script that could have actually affected production. But the way these are based on actual books, I would have presumed that the episode scripts were pretty much locked at the start of the season.
Well, I think, and that was one Patrick's episode. It was a big episode, and there was a lot of discussion because it wasn't really, they had the material, but it wasn't getting them what they wanted. Break it down with Patrick's episode. We find out who the killer is of a major character. We find out, Denise's nephew is behind this heist ring that started in the first episode. And so basically, a lot of times as we get into the season, we keep shooting, and they're looking at footage, and all of a sudden they see a storyline that changes. And so all of a sudden they have to rewrite it, come back and figure out how to play that. And there was notes coming in from the studio more so than on Bosch, because again, it was Freevee, and they had come from, most people I believe had come from network TV. So we had a little bit more juggling to do and balancing, but they always gave us a template no matter what when we started. And to be quite honest with you, we had schedules, we had the bones, right? As far as what certain lines they'd say and the way you play something, or how somebody's going to get their teeth knocked out, that could change. But Peter Jan Berger was really good about making sure that we had the bones and stuff. Because I know I've been on other shows where you have 2 pages of outline, and
the outline is not like the outline on these. The outline on these is 4 pages. There are lines of dialogue in the scenes, it's exactly enough to be able to be in the van and know what you're going to be doing in general.
Yeah. And Peter Jan Berger was really good working with Tom Bernardo, and to a certain extent, we need this scene earlier, like Lizona for the takedown of the bad guy in the parking lot. just so that we can permit it, to get all these permits and to lock the traffic down. It just takes over weeks to do this stuff. And you have to have those scenes written so that you can actually go apply for that stuff. And again, we're getting, trust me, we were figuring out where the show was going. And also, we were under the assumption it would be continuing, but there's other shows that it's way worse on it than we always had this structure for it, and usually the scripts by the time we started prep.
Oh yeah, and the whole follow home robbery thing was not in any of the books. That was real news that was happening in Los Angeles, that they cracked the code.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I've
Wow.
talked to Tom about, someone said, well, what if one of the people involved in these, they knew they wanted that as a storyline, but then someone in the room came up with the idea is related to Vasquez, and now it's involving our main characters. You probably know this term better than I do, Trey. Michael has a theory about stories, like they seem unrelated, the A and B storyline, and then they become entwined. I forget, he's got a phrase for it, but
Yeah, I can't remember.
and so that fits it feels like it would have been in the books because it has that very Connolly kind of fingerprint on it. But as soon as that came up in the room, they wanted to go after it. But now they're not starting with something from the book, and they're having to intertwine a story into what the books have. So that's why it's maybe a little trickier than you might think.
And speaking of the books, now I haven't read the books, so I'm not familiar, but I also remember from the last episode that we talked about how Madison Lintz, who plays Maddie Bosch, had expanded as an actor and was sort of and had more and more roles. Is that Maddie Bosch character as prevalent in the books, or is that really something that the TV show just gave the creatives an opportunity to explore? Gave all of you an opportunity to explore. Anybody read the books? Anybody have to do that homework?
Well, Trey and I stopped reading the books in season, like when we first met, we read the books thinking that we were doing good homework. And then you'd be on the scouts, and everyone had done it, right? Like everyone had done this homework. And then you'd be on the scouts, and people would be worrying about things that were in the books, but not in the show. And so we realized, okay, we got to stop reading the books so we don't drag things around that we think we have to worry about. So now I can start reading the books.
Well, do talk to me about working with this cast in general. That is a transition. Both Madison Lintz, Titus playing Bosch, Mimi Rogers playing Honey Chandler. How did they take to the new rhythm of Bosch Legacy?
I mean, from my perspective, really, really well. I know Titus was excited to figure out. He came across and the reason that his office has a Kurosawa poster in it is he came across the idea of becoming like a Ronin. So, a masterless samurai as a detective, like he's got the retired badge, but he can't use, like he doesn't have the power of the police department behind him like he used to. And I know he was excited to figure that out. And he figured it out really well. Now, Madison Lintz became an amazing actor before our eyes. Both Trey and I directed her when she was really young and very naturally talented. And then there's a phase all young actors go through when they're going, like, she takes the craft seriously. So she was taking classes. And then there was about a year where you could see the gears moving in like the first take. But then she was able to turn that off and just be in the moment, which is what's so crazy hard about being a good actor. Paul not being able to walk must have driven him crazy because he's one of the few actors I know that as soon as he's done with hair and makeup, he steps in instead of his stand-in. Like he wants to be there when you're setting up the shots. I mean, we got really blessed with an amazing cast. Mimi Rogers is a total pro and a real delight. And yeah, I don't know, Stephen Chang is amazing. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's me from a few episodes. Everyone else is there the whole time.
Well, yeah, I think it was clearly for Mimi Rogers and for Madison. Yeah, they were actually getting stories centered around them, and again, more from their perspectives and female perspective. So for money, she loved it because she had power. She was in the show working, and she loved to show that off. And I think with Madison, to Patrick's point, we saw her just all of a sudden start, giving these little looks back to Titus and to other actors. And I can't remember, I guess it was season one. I'm gonna say it's season one when she gets abducted or she goes missing at the end. And then season 2, we spend the whole time of finding her in the box. We did a lot of rehearsals with that. We actually had the real scorpion that came out there, and it was this funny Australian guy that brought it and told these stories and put her in a box. And we were like looking at the cameras, but like that scene where, having to be in the box and that panic is like one of our better scenes because you really feel like you're in there suffocating. And then when the guy kidnaps her, we had a stunt double there for her, but she actually did the whole stunt herself. So I really saw her take on a role more like a lead actor, like Titus would do, try to do all the stunts. So just from an acting standpoint, she just blew it out of the water. And then stunt wise, I mean, she was really good, and she can drive the car really well. The funny thing is, like, we literally taught her in the podcast before, we're talking about how we had to teach her to drive. Alex Daniels taught her to drive. And now, like, I'll go out there and I'll say, Maddie, I have a double, but can you go down there and do a U-turn and flip the lights on and miss those cars? Yeah, okay, do it. It's fun to see her grow as an actress from not being able to drive, doing her own stunts.
I learned how to drive on a show.
Well, Jason or Derrick, on the execution side, I'm curious if there are other scenes or moments or time with specific actors, whatever triggers it, that are some of your favorites from Bosch Legacy.
This is Derrick. I just wanted to add that I don't know if I've ever worked with a cast that had less ego than this cast did, in terms of actors can make things difficult on a set if they choose to. And this is not an easy show. And they never made it difficult. Like, everything we threw at them, despite the hours, despite the company moves, like, they would just show up prepared and they would go to work. And I always felt like I could walk up to any one of our cast members and, say, if I needed them to do something lighting specific, we're doing this thing and we need you to stand here. We need you to have this look. Like, it just wasn't a problem to go and have that conversation on my own. And some other shows, like, you wouldn't do that, or you'd run it by the DP or the director, like somebody else would have that. And everybody was just so familial. Like, it was really just, it made the day so pleasant when the actors are as approachable as the crew, and we're all there on the same team, and you really felt that teamwork with them. They were not removed from us at all. They were right there with us in the trenches, battling it out minute by minute, the same way the rest of us were. So yeah, highest praise for all of them. And I was sad that Jamie was not in the Legacy.
Oh.
I didn't realize he wasn't going to be there when I showed up. He's one of the original Bosch actors who went off to do other things, I guess.
Yeah, and such a wonderful, wonderful good egg.
He did come back and appear in the Legacy in season 2 when Maddie's in the hospital. He comes back and visits Bosch.
Yeah, I was bummed it wasn't my episode when Jamie came back. Yeah, it's like you had friendships. Like, yeah, I missed. He didn't come back, and I didn't get to see him. I was scouting, and it's just like, man, he doesn't live in LA. So when you see that these people for 7 seasons, and then I was really sad when Jamie came back. I missed him. But as far as like Derrick was saying, it's definitely the most approachable cast, and no one's ever late. I've never seen anyone ask. Very rare did someone say line, and that's just how you're making your day. We don't have to do multiple takes because they're so professional, and everyone's just so good at what they're doing. So that also helps in knowing that we're going to do 3 takes to get out of here and move on to the next scene, and that's a huge part of it.
And that they would bring back cast members that weren't on Legacy, but the fans really wanted. You got to have Creighton Barrow come back, right? So you can see Troy and Greg, and Deji Luray came back, and I got to work with him in my episode, and that's really fun because he is now a showrunner, director. He's created his own series that's doing well, so it's just really fun to have. Because, in our minds, it's a 10-season show, even though there's this, style shift and everything after 7.
The one thing which, Skid, we didn't talk very much on the previous podcast, which was a huge thing on ours. Actually, we talked about police procedure and the reality of the sets and locations, going to the actual locations and restaurants. The one thing that we did as well as all the interactive. So like if a phone rings, you'll see that phone number come up. or you have all these still shoots. And,
Right.
again, like when money ran for campaign manager, we had to shoot all this video footage, and the cast was great because you would say, hey, I need you to come do this after they've done 5 pages. And then, they were so gung-ho, she would like go down there and with some extras and you do it on video. Like the rest of the crew is off doing something else. And then just even the last episode when they featured the Flower Girls, they had websites with girls, you had victims on the side of streets. And so to Jason and to Derrick and then to the cast and the crew, it was almost like making another little short film. But when you watch the show and you see Money flipping through, looking at the prison tattoos on Zerillo and Patrick's episode, and then you see this video footage, our video playback, Judy Marks is amazing. She'd always do this long list. And literally, I think for Patrick's list, there was 67
Drops and
things that
things.
she
Yeah.
had to create, basically a long list. And a lot of times you had to like just not only was it a phone number, but it was a story behind it. It's like a birth certificate or like a police report. And so like she would get writer support. And then like sometimes, go to Derrick and Jason, and sometimes Jason would be shooting somebody else's episode, a feature, but it was like, I think that's another thing, because a lot of times you watch shows today, they won't show that stuff. They don't show the footage. They always talk it out. They don't show you the material. And I think that's one thing that obviously we carried over from Bosch to Bosch Legacy, the realism of, what these places look like. And you have to have a cast, because I've been on other shows where like,
They won't even shoot their own inserts.
yeah, they won't shoot their own inserts. And our cast does that. So thank you, Patrick.
Yeah. No, I mean, we've all seen it. Yeah. Meanwhile, Titus knows how to I remember some episode Ernest was directing. Oh, when he found the little card in the quarter in the original Bosch, he did that so well. And I was like, well, that's hard to do. Like, that's really hard to do. And it's all like he's doing the inserts and he's also performing. And so you can have a camera shooting the inserts as he's performing. It's pretty impressive, even though, yeah.
But it's also just to talk about Patrick here, and Derrick was out there, but we did the scene where Bosch and Mo go to the hotel and they find the room and they find where they left the black ice, and then they call the corrupt sheriff who they think is going to show up and at that hotel. So it's like Patrick had shot listed it out, and there's so much tension in that scene, and you really feel like you're like in a Hitchcock film, or where all of a sudden you think somebody's going to get shot, then it just dissipates, and then it moves to the next question. So that I just want to give a credit to Derrick and to Patrick for that motel scene, because I thought it turned out fantastic.
Ah, shucks.
And
Thanks.
Steven Fierberg. That was a
It's Steven
beautiful
Fierberg.
episode. That
Yeah.
episode was like, that was a beautiful episode.
That was really tough. It's really funny. We're both in the ASC, and I know that episode was really hard on him. And he came up to me shortly after it dropped. And he's like, "Oh, it's maybe the highest rated thing on IMDb that I've ever shot." And I was like, "Well, that's good."
The funny thing is, I looked him up on IMDb, and now he's known for Bosch Legacy. I was like, he's been shooting since the 80s, and I was like, he must have said like, I'm really proud of this show, and I want to be known for. I go, that's an amazing accomplishment that he put that Bosch. Like, I was like, that's amazing.
Yeah, he's really proud of it. He really is.
I worked with Steven Spielberg on Attila back in 2001. It was a USA Network miniseries starring Gerard Butler that we filmed in Lithuania, and I was the DGA trainee. Steven, if you're hearing this, you're welcome to come on this show. We'll talk about your stuff as well.
Well, for me, I think I know that if you are a below the line person who's listening to this podcast, or a filmmaker who's listening to this podcast, you'll understand how much this team becomes your family. And Jason and Derrick were the family I brought to the show. Like, we were already working together, and I don't know, it was just such an honor to keep working with them when I got the chance to, and for us to, I feel like the challenges of this world, and I was very proud of us, especially under, you get scrutinized by Peter Jan Brugge. He is a tough producer, and he demands that you do good work. And man, oh man, I love that guy. And for him to kind of fall for these people that I brought to the show was, a huge, I don't know. I just felt like well deserved for them to get recognized by such a strong filmmaker. And thank you for making me look good. And Trey and I spent 2 years in, around, and before and after COVID, basically seeing each other more than our own families. And so he's my brother from another mother, who thank God he was with me, because we've pulled off some crazy the prep and the exactitude of the prep. And Trey has this scary ability to know to like a 15-minute increment how long it'll take to do something. And sometimes it'll throw you as the director, and he's right. Like you'll think like, I can never get that all done in that time. He's like, calm down. And then he'll know I'll show up with too many shots, and he knows I'm going to cross some out in the middle of shooting the scene. And what do you know? There we are on the time. So it's like, I love you guys. That's all I'll say.
Kid, we were prepping for Patrick's episode, and I told a story. I worked on the movie as a second AD at Traffic. And so,
oh yeah, this is so good.
So basically, there's a scene down at the border. So they would only let us have like 18 people there to shoot for the total crew plus cast. So the second AD and the production manager and the other second AD, crew member and props, they all dressed like in uniforms, like they're border patrol. So it's Michael Douglas's first day. And
I love that that's Michael Douglas's first day. Like, hey, let's all go to the real border.
Yeah. So I come down with Michael Douglas and this other actor who actually was on Bosch and told me a side story to the story. So we go down there. Basically, they're going to rip a car apart. We have 2 cameras, 1,000-foot loads, and we're using the real guys, like the head of the border, of that border, and then somebody from El Paso who's part of the customs, and the real people. So I show up, and in about 5 or 10 minutes, we start shooting because they want us in and out of there. They literally had us shooting. This is when the Benjamin brothers were terrorizing Tijuana. And so we start going through the scene, and we have real border patrol guys, and they're ripping the car apart, and they're pulling out cocaine. They're putting them in grocery, what are those called, push carts that you get in a grocery store? And so we're going in a circle, and there's 2 cameras, 1,000-foot loads, and they just keep ad-libbing and doing things. But all of a sudden, this one shopping cart was so full, I snuck in, I pulled it back, and I started putting it on the table. And then I pushed it back into the agent. And then they continue around, and at the end, cut. And so I told Patrick that story. So he goes, shopping cart. So in his episode, you'll see them put all the bricks of cocaine into the shopping cart and then roll it out to where it gets distributed into the plastic stuff. But the side note is the actor from Bosch told me that when they went down there, Michael Douglas goes, okay, are we going to rehearse? And Steven goes, no, we're shooting. He goes, but you're not going to rehearse? And he goes, nope, we're shooting. And like he said, like, we're shooting. It was so funny. Like Michael was kind of upset he didn't get to rehearse. But people, I did a lot of movies in Soderbergh. They caught on pretty quick. So, but that's Patrick's little.
Yeah, it was amazing to be like, because I would overthink that completely. Like, work trucks from the place they're doing the scene, and shopping carts are great. But you left out the best part of the story, which was.
I was going to let you tell that.
Oh, Trey finishes. So Trey finishes doing this scene. And
well, let me give you a little. So we're doing the scene. I look in the car, and we had all these meetings about the car, and I see a baby seat in there. I go, "That's really a nice touch. We didn't talk about that in the art department meeting." And so there's a baby, and I was like, "And that's weird." And then I'll let Patrick finish it.
And so Trey's telling me the story, and he's like, and so at the end, he goes over to the agent, and the agent thanks him for helping out. And then, how did you find out? What was the word? What was the phrasing when you found out?
If you get drug tested the next couple of weeks, don't do it, because that was real cocaine. They actually had saved a real car that had come across the border, and that was real cocaine that we pulled out.
You're just handling like bricks of coke, thinking they're props. Oh my God, Bane.
That's many years ago.
Probably out of your system by now, Trey. Yeah, so you're good.
Definitely.
I don't know if you're going to want to use this or not. It's really more for Jason and Trey, perhaps. it's sort of the Steven Fierberg origin story with me on Legacy. When Steven originally called me to do the show, he was talking about wanting a completely different look for the show than any of the Bosches had had in the past. And he pitched a whole film noir look for the new Legacy for his season of it. We probably spoke for about an hour, and we were like going into, well, they can wear hats that shield their eyes and all the lighting effects and whatnot. And I got hired on the basis of that conversation by Steven. And then when we got to prepping the show, it turned out that really no one else was doing that. It was strictly Steven. And the producers apparently wanted to try this new look, but they didn't have, like, production design wasn't going to go noir, costumes were not going to go noir. It was strictly kind of a lighting cinematography thing. And then as the show began, and I was working, we have two DPs, Jason and Steven, and traditionally on Bosch, there've always been two DPs. And like at the very start, when Patrick was shooting and Paul Summers were shooting, they were like two peas in a pod. Like they were very in sync with each other stylistically. And when Michael McDonough took over, again, they were very communicative. Like I could tell differences in their approach, but the average viewer probably would not. Like they were very seamless. But this season, it was very interesting because Steven had this whole noir kind of quality to what he wanted to do. And Jason was very much original Bosch, I thought, and perhaps even more so than the original Bosch in terms of like letting things go and
being grittier and letting it drop.
Yes, very much so. Whereas Steven was sort of in spite of the noir, he was very much into the world of sort of beauty lighting with larger sources and keys coming from the sides rather than the tops, which was traditional for Bosch. And so it was a little, it falls on the gaffer to try to create continuity between the DPs because that's the person who's always there and the DPs come and go when they do their shows. And so I would be whispering to Steven about how Jason, what the other shows look like, and do you want to do a little more like this? And I'd be whispering to Jason about what Steven was doing, and do you want to do a little more like this? And Peter Yan, our producer, finally took me aside and said, we need Jason to light a little more and we need Steven to light a little less. Can you figure that out? And I was just curious because I've never actually had the noir conversation with anyone. I mean, I had it with Peter early on to see, like, are we really doing this? And was sort of told no. But I was just wondering if there was more to that story, perhaps from Trey, if this was discussed during pre-production. And then Jason, I was kind of curious about your take on that. And you were pretty strong, I thought, in how you wanted your shows to look and willing to take some pretty big chances of, like, it was risky lighting, I would call it, in ways that I don't feel like Steven wanted to go in that direction. He was a lot more, I would say, polished, maybe is the word for it. I thought from my perspective as a gaffer, that was a really interesting contrast between the two of them, which was unusual for the show. Like I haven't really seen the two divergent directions like that. Anybody have any comment on that?
This is Trey talking. I think when we started off, Steven, was he's an old friend of Peter Yan, was coming in and definitely had a lot of his own opinions, but also he would say, well, I don't want to go too far off the path either. But also I think it's, it would be interesting because Patrick being a DP, then Patrick would start to see him do something and he goes, I don't know why he's doing that. And then he'd do something else. Oh, I see where he's going. Okay. Again, I think people approach things, there's a mountain peak, somebody's come up the east side and somebody's come up the west side, and hopefully we get to the peak. But and to your point, he did use a lot more lights, and he was definitely, Steven wanted to make sure everything, he could pull everything out, the corners, you could see everything. And I think Peter Yan had a few conversations with him, so I think he kind of went one direction and kind of switched as we went along. But they did, yeah, I agree with what you said.
Yeah, it's tough it's hard for me to not say something to the DP when I feel like it's so different than, because I'd done the previous two seasons of Legacy and did not know that there was a different thing happening. I just thought it was Steven's style, which polished is the perfect word for it. And so then then my main concern becomes the thing that I, ever since starting to shoot, is the thing that I've had the hardest time letting go of is making the day. Like, we are not going to go over 12. We have to make this day and we've got to get these story points across. And so then most of my conversations became about that, like just making sure, reiterating what I know Trey was already talking about, but just to let so yeah, I feel I do this on all the jobs I'm directing on, and it's funny. There's often these moments where I'm like, why is that happening that way? And then you see it, and you're like, huh, cool. Like it's a great analogy getting to the same mountaintop. You're like, oh, I wouldn't have done it that way, and that totally works. And even with Paul Summers and I, who when we first met and first co-shot on something, he hated Kinoflows, and I was using them all the time. But you could have cut our footage together pretty seamlessly and never known, like shot to reverse shot, and never known that you'd switch between two DPs. Like we had very similar, just gut. We both came up as technicians around the same time period, and I think that it influenced us a lot.
Well, as far as me coming in as the second, there's a main DP, and Steven was the main to come in as the second DP and try to have that Bosch look that we've had, from the previous 7 seasons. And then they wanted a new look for Legacy, and then they weren't really happy with that first season. And then it kind of evolved. And then by the season I came in, they kind of wanted it back to a little bit noir, darker. And then we got to it, but it just took, I think by episode 6 or 4, right in the middle, me and Steven both adjusted our lighting to balance out and look, pretty even and the same.
I want to talk about how the series wrapped up. When did you find out that season 3 of Bosch Legacy was going to be the last?
During shooting Ballard, right? Didn't we find out when we were in Ballard?
Yeah. So we found out in August, at the end of August, and we had finished shooting Legacy in the springtime, late spring. So I think it was, Amazon was going through a lot of changes, and the big change is that Freevee, they realized they didn't need Freevee. And so Freevee was being sucked back into Prime, and they were just going to do advertising on Prime. So with that in mind, they basically, and then they bought MGM. So the studio was going through a lot of different changes and growing in certain areas and not growing in certain areas. I think the creatives really wanted the show to go. There was intention to give us a season 4 and for us to write to that. But I think at the end of the day, just with everybody trying to figure out how to monetize in this world of streaming and advertising video on demand, and how do they make money, Amazon really started looking at all the projects. And I know for a fact during the strike, the accounting up in Seattle started really looking at how much money and stuff they were spending on and our return on investment. So from our standpoint, we all thought we would have a season 4 because we really didn't write to it. And see, our episode 10 was really an introduction for Ballard. We used the case of the Flower Girls that has been on his desk. It wasn't really ending for Bosch, but it was the beginning for Ballard. So
Trey, let me ask about that. So is that always the plan, that episode 10 was going to be sort of an intro for Ballard, or did you have to rework the season in order to make room for that? Because that episode is kind of standalone. To your point, the storylines have been completely wrapped up, and this is really about the interaction between Maggie Q's character, Ballard, for the new series, and Bosch.
Again, this was all organic and moving at the time. So essentially, during the strike, we had worked to get Ballard greenlit. They had basically, Amazon had greenlit a writer's room. So they were talking about putting Ballard into production. And they wanted to somehow slip her into Bosch so it wasn't so, such a jarring thing. And their worlds do cross. And that kind of leads us back to like Patrick's episode. We were trying to maybe even have that standalone come a little sooner in our season, but also we were under the gun as far as trying to cast the lead. You're trying to put a pilot together, and all that stuff takes a lot of time. So essentially it ended up saying, let's do it at the end, because we'll have the time to prepare to find the main lead to that and write to that. So at the time, it was only going to be introduction for Ballard into the Bosch world. And that's maybe why we had to, juggle some scripts early on as well.
Well, I know the Ballard series dropped in full just last week. And while we're not going to do any spoilers for it, I am myself, in fact, have only watched a couple of those episodes. Trey, as you alluded to, you're involved in the series. Anybody else working on Ballard? Anybody else's credits we're going to see?
I directed episodes 3 and 4.
And I had the opportunity to do a little bit of additional photography on Patrick's episode in episode 3.
Yeah, that was really fun. We kind of got the band back together for a few days.
It was very
So on Bosch Legacy, I moved into the role of producer. And so the season 4 Bosch Legacy, if it had gone, I was going to move up with Jamie Busgard Martin and be the executive producer on that. So I was a co-executive producer on Ballard, and we had the director from season, Jet Wilkerson, who did a great job on episode 10 of Legacy. And so we got along really well, and I AD'd that one. And so we kind of came to agreement that it'd be best for the show because I had a lot of knowledge from 10 years of Bosch, and Ballard was just getting off the ground. There was a lot of new people involved in that. And so I went AD'd the first 2 episodes, and then just was like a producer, and then for the rest of the episodes. And then on episode 10, Carrie Bruno, the other assistant director, had gotten another show and left. She's great. So I actually went back and did episode 10 as an assistant director as well as a co-executive producer.
Good, you get clocking those DGA hours.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I like how things have started off, and without teasing how things are going to end, can you tell us anything about Ballard season 2? Is the world of Bosch going to continue?
Yeah, I mean, we have people, there's surprises in there. People will appear from the original series and the legacy that all the old fans will love. It's definitely a different animal. It's cold cases. Ballard has been pushed off in episode 10 at Bosch Legacy. She works with RHD. And then the series is, 4 months later, she's now running a cold case. It's because she's had a bit of a falling out with another police officer. The big difference here than the Bosch Legacy stories, it's a little bit more emotional in the sense that you actually are following victims and you're seeing it through a female detective's eyes. And they have a cast of character volunteers and reserve officers. So it's interesting watching Bosch, which could be very emotional, impactful, but it was always very like police procedure and you're going after the bad guy. Whereas this one, you actually start with the victim and you start with their families and so immediately you're kind of pulled in there. And I think Patrick can probably speak to the difference between Bosch and Ballard, just the show itself.
Yeah, it's I did one of my 2 episodes, and we did it in a block, and Trey and Jet, they did a block, and then I did a block, and then the show went to single episodes. And one of the episodes in my block had more of a procedural feeling where as the main story is continuing, there was a crime that got solved within that one episode. I mean, the number one thing is Maggie Q is a freaking movie star. So that like I know during Bosch Legacy, that final season, the trick was like, well, how do we find someone that in their first scene with Titus doesn't, holds their own with Titus? And it's a non-issue now. It's, Maggie's a badass. But what is interesting is the kind of group of people helping her solve these cold cases is much more diverse and I shouldn't say just, but not all police officers. So there's not this uniform approach to the way they parse out and work on cases as a group. And then the storyline of Ballard being on the outside and maybe pushed aside a bit in the force, but yet finding this place where she can do real good is a completely different spin. And the funny thing is, it's still along those Michael Connelly, like everybody counts and nobody counts vibes. Like this is so that because she's digging up she's solving these cold cases.
And I think to Patrick's point as well is that, Maggie is great. Again, a movie star, but it's funny. She actually has the same kind of mentality that Titus has. Like these shows cannot be made unless your number one is gun ho, wants to be there, especially.
You went out and shot her like with drones in the ocean on a board, like
It's just, yeah, it's just like they have to be a team player. And, hopefully the, second season will calm down as far as time is for her. But she, and she does make the show. She's amazing. And it was great seeing both her and Titus work in episode 10 of season 3 Legacy. And now you can see where like she can carry that Bosch mantle. And the whole thing is they wanted a show that was more on the west side. So you see Malibu, you see Santa Monica, you see color, there's more color, there's new DPs, but yet it still has to feel down and dirty and inside Michael Connelly's world, universe. It can't be too far off the path. And I think to me, she's like a female Bosch.
yeah, she's great.
She keeps digging and goes after the crime, both as an actress and a character, and then personally as a person.
Well, Ballard's available now. They dropped all 10 episodes at once on Prime. Outside of the Michael Connelly world, where else are we going to see your guys' work?
Well, if you haven't watched it already, by now the whole season's aired because they were releasing it one episode at a time. I was the producing director on Duster, a show set in Phoenix, shot in Albuquerque, and also set in 1972 in a very bad robot world. So that was a real fun ride, pun intended. I directed a bunch of the stunt stuff. The pursuit arm team said on the last day I was working with them, they're like, we think you've clocked over 500 miles with us. I was like, oh my gosh. So that's a really fun show. If you haven't, when you're done watching Ballard, go check out Duster. And then I've got one thing penciled in, but I don't want to say anything out loud because then it won't happen.
Fingers crossed for you, Patrick.
I thought the opening title sequence for Duster was fabulous. I've never seen it.
So wonderful.
I want to watch it over and over again.
And every episode they start putting in little Easter eggs from previous episodes. So it's not the same every time.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to have to
great.
rewatch some of those, I think.
Yeah, it's really great. I started noticing in episode 4, but now I got to go watch episode 2 and 3. Yeah, Latoya and JJ are just the scripts are great, and that team was really wonderful. And the show was shocker when they're good. There's sections that are tough. Like I had to pull off all the stunt shots for episode 5. Yeah, episode 5. And Todd Amato, another really great AD, was the only person who thought like we could actually get it all done. I was like, I think we can get it done. He's like, oh, we're gonna get it done. And sure enough, we got like shot 42 off the list as just before the sun came up, and that was it. We were headed home.
Right after Bosch, I went and shot a little $500,000 indie feature that'll hopefully get into the festival circuit, and if not festival circuit, it'll hopefully get sold. And that was called Cookbook for Southern Housewives. It's a 1960s mafia housewife that gets caught up in the mafia, and it was a fun little thing that was way different from the Bosch world, and it was fun to shoot, and hopefully that'll get picked up.
What a great title.
Fingers crossed, Jason. We'll keep an eye out for that as well.
Speaking there.
I know.
How about you, Trey?
So basically, Frank Tignini, who we had on the last podcast, was doing a show called Countdown, and they had a little second unit that went over and AD'd a couple of days, and it's on Amazon as well. And that looks like it's going to be a fun show to watch.
Yeah, that trailer's really fun.
Yeah. So, but I'm going to have to tell you guys, anybody listening to this, it is a lot of people not working out there, so don't feel bad. It's really sad in this town right now. So hopefully,
It's very slow.
for all our sakes, that's production can start coming back and the tax incentives work, and we can get LA back working.
Derrick, how about you?
Bosch was not quite my swan song. After Legacy ended, I was hired to do the lighting design for Warner Brothers' The Pit, the medical show.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
I think the audience has heard of that show.
yeah, it's doing very well. So I was like a consulting lighting designer for about a month and a half, got them up and running. And then I pulled the trigger on retirement and went back to school. So I am now studying medical imaging. I have a son who's a doctor, and he inspired me. And it's a whole different kind of imaging than what I've spent the last 35 years doing. But it's been really fun so far. I'm really enjoying it. Just about to enter my second year of school now.
Well, Derrick, as someone who also transitioned out, I completely understand. If you do start to miss talking about it, though, think about coming back here as a co-host. Always love having a co-host on to help with these episodes, and would love to have you get your take on stuff.
Thank you.
On that note, guys, we're going to call it a wrap. Great having all of you here. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having
Thank
us.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Skid. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Listeners, I always appreciate your feedback. My email address is skid@belowtheline, one word, .biz. That's B-I-Z. Belowtheline.biz is also our website, where you'll find more than 260 past episodes. So if you're a new listener, check out the catalog. Closing credits, thanks to Curtis Five for our music, John Wan for our logo, and to all of our listeners, I appreciate you. If you're a fan of Below the Line, consider a purchase. The logo is available on t-shirts, mugs, and stickers at redbubble.com. Other ways you can help. First, give us a positive rating wherever you get your podcasts. Second, tell your friends about an episode you enjoy, because that's how we gain new listeners. All of that aside, whatever your engagement, the fact that you're still listening means a lot to me. Thanks again from Below the Line. Nice to see you again, Trey.
Good to see you again. Thank you, Robert.
Now, see, I will have to edit that out, because if you don't call me Skid, they're going to think there's a sixth person in this room, Trey. So that's a
Well,
reminder to everybody.
that's why I froze up. So can I do it again?
Sure, you can go right
Because
ahead.
I didn't know if I should say Skid or Robert. I got little.
If my mom
Sorry,
shows
guys.
up, let's pretend we've been using Robert the whole time. Otherwise, Skid is better.
Got it.
All right.
Okay.
Trey intro, take 9.
Nice to see you again,
sorry.
Trey.